It's a good group. Morning, everybody. Fox News alert now. Protesters hitting the streets of New York City. A grand jury does not indict a New York City police officer in the so-called Chokehold case. Many insisting justice was not served in the death of Eric Garner. He was age 43, a father and a grandfather. There's a lot to go through in the story today as we say good morning to you. I'm Bill Hemmer, and welcome here to America's Newsroom. Off we go. Martha, morning.
Bill, good morning, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. So last night, there were dozens of arrests as the protesters began to flood into the streets in New York City, in the Times Square region in particular. They were chanting that they did believe that race was a factor when the policemen put Eric Garner in a chokehold arrest back in July. Here is the tape, part of the tape, of that incident.
Don't touch me. Came over. Not touch me. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
On that recording, Garner saying he can't breathe 11 times. The criticism from the White House was quick.
This is an issue that we've been dealing with for too long, and it's time for us to make more progress than we've made. I'm not interested in talk. I'm interested in action, and I am absolutely committed as President of the United States to making sure that we have a country in which everybody believes in the core principle that we are equal under the law.
So David Lee Miller now live in New York City at a place last night where between the Christmas tree lighting at Rockefeller Center and the hundreds of protesters, it was a busy scene. Today, what is the expectation, David Lee?
Bill, at least one other demonstration is planned for later today, but at this hour, things here in Midtown Manhattan are quiet, but that could soon change. Once we heard yesterday that there would not be an indictment, demonstrators fanned out all across the city. A few dozen laid down on the ground at Grand Central Station, that is the major train station here, trying to disrupt the commuters during rush hour traffic. Others tried to cut off travel across the Brooklyn Bridge and the Lincoln Tunnel that connects Manhattan with New Jersey. Another target for protesters was the nationally broadcast Christmas tree lighting ceremony that was taking place at Rockefeller Center. Some of the protesters tried to force their way through barricades and around police, but that event took place without disruption. The protests, though, they were mainly peaceful. In total, though, 83 people were arrested, most for disorderly conduct. A handful of demonstrators were charged with resisting arrest. Eric Garner's family and some of the other activists have spoken publicly calling for demonstrations, Bill, but they have also said that the protesters must be peaceful. And so far, most of them have been. Of course, there have been exceptions.
The officer involved, age 29, been on the force about 7 or 8 years. His name is Pantaleo. What did he have to say so far, David Lee?
You know, soon after word got out that there would not be an indictment, the officer released a statement. It's the first time we have heard from him. This is what he had to say. I'm going to quote it now. "I became a police officer to help people and to protect those who can't protect themselves." He went on, quote, "It is never my intention to harm anyone, and I feel very bad about the death of Mr. Garner. My family and I include him and his family in our prayers, and I hope that they will accept my personal condolences for their loss." Eric Garner's wife, speaking at a news conference yesterday evening, wasted no time in rejecting the officer's apology.
Hell no. The time for remorse would have been when my husband was yelling to breathe.
Officer remains suspended right now. There is an internal investigation being conducted by the New York City Police Department. Again, he remains on suspension. This, as the Justice Department, Bill, is also conducting its own investigation into possible civil rights violations.
More to come on that. David Lee Miller, thank you. On the sidewalks in New York City, Martha.
Well, meanwhile, the grand jury decision sparked protests not just here in New York, but other places as well.
No justice! No peace! No racist! Police! No justice! No peace!
That's what it looked like in Washington, D.C. yesterday. Demonstrators chanting "No justice, no peace." Protesters marching in downtown Seattle as well, repeating Eric Garner's dying words of "I can't breathe." Police also took to the streets in Oakland, some of them using the hands up, don't shoot gesture, which of course refers to the Ferguson protests.
And just like in Ferguson, Missouri, the feds are now getting involved in this case. Justice Department announcing it will conduct its own investigation into the death of Eric Garner. Here's the Attorney General late yesterday. Eric Holder on that.
This is not a New York issue, nor a Ferguson issue alone. Those who have protested peacefully across our great country following the grand jury's decision in Ferguson have made that very clear.
Some legal analysts criticizing the grand jury decision as flat out wrong. Judge Andrew Napolitano says the officer should have been indicted, pointing out the contrast with Ferguson, he says, could not be more clear. Here he is.
When you realize this is not a Ferguson, this is not a person threatening the police, this is not a fight for the cop's gun, this is not a person trying to kill the cop, as was the case in Ferguson. This is a person committing such a low-level crime, it doesn't even rise to the level of jaywalking. They basically should have said, get out of here. There's no reason to arrest somebody who's selling cigarettes to homeless people. And there's absolutely no reason for him to end up dead as a result of the physical contact initiated by the police.
It's a new law in 2014 that you can't sell loose cigarettes on the street, and that is the offense that he was charged with, or that they were attempting to charge him with. The big question, though, another big question here, is excessive force. Is that an issue? And how is that defined in New York City? Race also being brought up here, and is that justified to bring up in this case? Did the police just do their job? We're going to get into all these really big questions throughout the course of the show today.
Indeed. This grand jury is different from the one in Ferguson. They can ask questions in Staten Island to witnesses, and the officer can be asked questions as well. As far as the makeup, it's been reported that 23 members were on that panel. 14 of them were white. 9 were non-white, generally meaning Hispanic, Black, or Asian. In this case, 12 jurors must agree to indict, but they did not get 12 jurors in Staten Island yesterday. A lot of questions, too, about what you can ask a witness, and apparently you can file them with the prosecutor, and if they pertain to the case, the prosecutor can go ahead and ask these questions to the witnesses. That is not the case in Ferguson. So two very different legal rules here between these grand juries in Missouri and New York.
And they also, looked in depth at the autopsy report, where there were a number of reasons listed for death. Chokehold has been the name that has been given to this case, but when you look into some of the details of how they say he died, there's some questions about that too. So obviously it's a heartbreaking, sad case, and everybody feels for the Garner family in this case. But the grand jury made the decision they made, and we're going to kind of take it apart and look at it throughout the course of the morning. All right.